Michael, lovely to be back here in very warm Johannesburg, sunny South Africa. Not, it seems.
No, the weather, on the last couple of days of Switzerland came back with us.
Yeah.
But we came back to some good news, which we'll get into.
Well, incredible news, actually, because the country's been waiting for years, literally 5 years. Is it since 2017 when Zuma was ousted and all of his cronies were finally allowed to be taken to task? Because up to that point, I guess it wasn't going to happen.
No, it was not. Yeah, so firstly, welcome to the A-Plus Show, episode 6.
Sure. And that's after we've had all of the...
That's after 5 episodes of A-Plus on location in Davos. We're now on the 6th episode locally. You've got to go to university to keep this kind of score.
Yeah, but if you do like our program, you can go and see 5 shows that we did in Davos. So
that's right.
Mike and I had a fantastic time there. Really a learning experience. I was telling someone about it today. They were very critical because of the way that they'd been exposed to Davos. And I said, hang on, it's a forum. I need to write something about it. I need to explain why I find it valuable, why I've gone back so many times. I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply my mind to that because it really is, if you consider what you can absorb, the knowledge that you can get there, how the whole thing works, how it's a forum, not a directive to the way the world should be going. I think people might see it in a different light. But anyway, this is not the time or the place to be trying to convince people that our trip to the World Economic Forum was worthwhile.
Yeah.
But being back home, it's always fantastic. I just love coming back home. Although this time around it was different in that when I got off the plane at our Tambo, I had to put a mask back on, which we hadn't had to wear in the UK when I was on business en route to Switzerland or in Switzerland.
Yeah.
People there are getting on with their lives. Here, we're still a little bit caught up.
Yeah, arriving in Zurich, and there was a journalist, former colleague of mine in Zinga, who was there with us, and we were the only 2 South African journalists. And just by chance, Swissair put us right next to each other on the plane, so we had about 10 hours to talk shop. So it was nice to catch up with her, but. Of course, we had to test for COVID before we could get into the World Economic Forum. So we've had over 2 years of mask wearing in this country to get to Switzerland, to Zurich, where we stuck out like sore thumbs because we were the only people in the airport with our masks on. But eventually we could get used to that feeling again of, okay, maybe I can take this thing off. It was a strange, really strange feeling.
And just to make it even stranger, the photographer from Cape Town, Greg Beadle, South African, who wore his mask, got on the plane. He was COVID-free, arrived in Davos where he'd been brought over specially, he's that good, by the World Economic Forum to be the official photographer there at the WEF, and he tests positive.
Yeah.
So Greg spent the whole week in Davos in isolation. What a waste. Anyway, I'm sure he's going to enjoy the next one even more. On to the show this time around. What have you got for our community?
Coming up on the show, I spoke to the National Prosecuting Authority's investigating Directorate spokesperson. I haven't spoken to the ID spokesperson before, and I thought it would be a good idea to expose the community to some good news. What is happening on the arrests front? And literally, we flew back on the Saturday, right? Did we fly back on the Friday?
I went via Qatar, so I only got home Sunday afternoon, which was okay because it was a long, drawn-out saga. But you got back on the...
I got back on the Saturday
morning.
We left on Friday. The news broke on Friday that there had been 5 big arrests by the ID and the Hawks. The Hawks had made the arrest in relation to Transnet, and this involved the former chief executive of Transnet, Siyabonga Gama.
Got to tell you a story. I played golf with him once, and Siyabonga Gama arrived at the golf course. It was at Rand Park. I remember it so well.
Yeah.
With a set of golf clubs that had the plastic on them, i.e. never been used before. And he played like someone who'd never played golf before. So he was game for anything, Siyabonga Gama. He was great fun in that round of golf. But that was a long time before he became infamous. And now he's in deep water.
Do you remember what he shot? Was it worse than the very first time?
Michael, much worse.
We played together.
Michael, much worse. Imagine arriving in a golf course with golf clubs that are still in the plastic, that have never even been practiced with before. So as I say, he was game. He was great fun. He got a lovely smile. But that was Siyabonga Gama. He unfortunately was game for stuff that he shouldn't have been, clearly with the Guptas and so on.
Little story. Before I actually met Alec Hogg, he invited me to the golf course. And because in my motivation letter to join BizNews, I had said I could swing a golf club. But, and that may have been the only time that I was economical with the truth. But I did say to him, I'm a better journalist than I am a golfer. And that has proved to be true.
Aren't we all? Thank heavens for that. Yeah.
So arrests, yay. Good bit of positive news coming out. Then I spoke to Advocate Paul Hoffman from Accountability Now, the director there, about what a STIRS compliant ACE, anti-corruption entity, is all about. STIRS compliant.
What is STIRS?
I'll get into that.
Okay.
And then a little bit of, well, if you're a drinker in the UK, the cost of beer. I just thought this would be a little fun segment. Not fun, but just an idea of how COVID, the world economy, supply chain, people's cost of living has gone up. Just comparing sort of the most expensive pint you can get in the UK versus the cheapest, and just a little look at the petrol price locally. It's hurting. People are going to hurt. The cost of fuel going up, cost of living going up, and how that's going to hurt the poorest South Africans the most. But that's all my side. Alec, your side?
I had a chat with Chris Griffith. He's the chief executive of Goldfields Limited, used to be the chief executive of Anglo Platinum. So he was an Anglo man, left Anglo, went to the opposition, and now he's growing Goldfields into, well, the fourth biggest gold miner in the world after an acquisition that shareholders absolutely hated. They dropped the share price 22%. So I had a chat with him about that. Interesting, very interesting for investors. Maybe a place to take a long-term investment into. That was the first one. Then I spoke with David Bacher on the Corion report. He's from Corion, to have a look at the performance of investment markets during May. And April was an absolute wipeout. May, for the first 3 weeks, another wipeout. So it looked like it was just going down one way. And then we had a lot of respite in the last week of May. But anyway, we'll pick up on that. And then you talk about the cost of living. According to the economists who do this kind of analysis, when inflation goes up, the best investment to have is a house, residential property. That's usually your best hedge against inflation.
Is that what traditional wisdom tells you? Or is that just...
No, that's true. That's the reality. Many South Africans during high inflationary times did very well out of property, those who bought houses. And the reason for that is that you bond it. So let's just say you're buying a property for 4 million rand and you take out a 3 million rand bond. That means you have an investment of 1 million rand. In an inflationary environment, after a few years, it's not unreasonable for a 4 million rand house to be worth 5 million rand. So you make a profit of 1 million rand, but you've only put in 1 million. So you make 100% return in a few years. And that's why residential property is a very good investment, or one that is favored by investors, because the bank actually takes a lot of the bank gives you the money to play with in many ways. You're leveraging, you're gearing up for it. And on that context, Magnus Heystek, who has long been a proponent of diversifying outside of South Africa, he has found a development in Mauritius called Harmony. It's a golf course beachfront development, only for the high end. You need about 20 million rand to be able to buy into it. But he says it's on a part of the island that they call Boere Monaco, because there's so many South Africans there. Black River. Apparently you talk Afrikaans and you get answered in Afrikaans there. So we'll have a little bit of a chat about that later.
He's the economist who said, or analyst who said, who made waves on social media for his Hartbeespoort property. Is that right?
Magnus is making waves everywhere. He's a financial advisor. He's an independent financial advisor, and one that many people find difficult to read, because he says it as he sees it. In this day and age, there aren't many people who do that. Many people have got obligations to their employers, or perhaps to vested interests, to direct them in a way or another. And that's why I love Magnus. I don't think he's always right, but I think he always believes he's right. He tells you what he really believes and what he honestly understands and what his analysis shows him. And he's been right a heck of a lot more times than he's been wrong. And as a financial advisor, if you're right 51% of the time, you'll make money.
Okay, kick us off with Mr. Griffith.
Indeed. Let's hear from Chris.
This is a big deal. It's a big to just land on the market. And we need to now, over the next number of months, before we put it to shareholders to a vote, we need to engage with them, spend time with them, help them see what we can see. And then over time, we expect our share price to re-rate.
So what are you seeing that they aren't right now?
The market is not giving them credit for, and probably won't, is the fact that some of their projects are probably not doable with the size of company that they are.
So he was talking to me after popping out from a discussion that he had with people in the United States. So he's doing a roadshow in America. And Chris Griffiths he's a straight talker. He's done this kind of roadshow many, many times in the past. And what he is saying in that clip is that although the share price is down 22%, it's only because it hasn't been properly analyzed yet, that the acquisition that they made, he said, took 7 months of research to find the right company, and it ticks all the boxes for what they've been trying to do strategically. I guess the hint to pick up from there is that Chris Griffith says, I've been in mining a long, long time. I understand what we're doing here. The market, Mr. Market doesn't like it. Mr. Market is wrong. If you want to have a bet in gold, buy some Goldfields Limited shares. You won't be wrong. You won't be sorry. That's pretty much his message.
So you're saying it's a good position to maybe get in there early, because if the CEO is so intent that what they're doing is right and that there is going to be value for shareholders, now's the time to get in without giving investment advice.
No, you can give investment advice. We're not financial advisors. People look at us in the media and they say, those guys don't know what they're talking about anyway. Absolutely. So we're not classified as investment advisors at all. But that's spot on. He's a vastly experienced executive. He wouldn't blow his career at the last hurdle with a deal that was stupid. He's done his homework. 7 months of due diligence, Mike, that's a lot of homework. So I get it. I get what he's saying. If you like gold, if you like gold shares, probably this is a buying opportunity, given that it's dipped.
What do we know about Yamana, the Canadian company?
It's got a number of big projects. It is a smaller company than Goldfields Limited, but very ambitious in its intentions. And as it was going to find it very difficult to develop those projects. It's not big enough to take them on. But now with Goldfields together, they can tackle them. And that's really his story, was they bought this company with its reserves, with its assets at a good price. The number he was using was many of the other acquisitions they looked at. See, what happens in gold mining is that you mine gold. So you have less gold next year than you had this year. So to continue to sustain it into the long-term future, you have to keep adding to your reserves. The problem is those reserves are now very expensive. So when you're looking to buy mines, individual mines, he was talking about, it costs you about $350 per ounce of gold in the ground. Remember, you still got to mine it out. With the Yamana deal, it was $200 per ounce of gold in the ground. So a significant discount to what they would have had to pay with other assets they were looking at. He's not a guy who is economical with the truth, and I would be happy to certainly give him the benefit of the doubt here. We'll only know in a couple of years' time. But Chris is a straight shooter, and likely, if you do like that sector, if you love gold shares, you're getting in at 22% cheaper than you could have previously.
Okay, to some good news, Alec.
I love this news. This is the best news.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often I get to speak about state capture and frame it in a positive light. The National Prosecuting Authority's Investigating Directorate. This is a unit that was created under the ambit of the National Prosecuting Authority through the National Director of Public Prosecutions. It was a presidential proclamation. President Ramaphosa said, I am creating, with the swish of a pen, I am creating a special unit, the Investigating Directorate, within the ambit of the NPA to combat complicated corruption, specialized looking at the Nugent Commission, that was the SARS, the stuff that went on at SARS.
Bain.
And at the State Capture Inquiry to streamline and to simultaneously, while the State Capture Inquiry was underway, the ID's investigators, which draws its resources from the state, from the Hawks, from SARS, from the police's IPID, and uses those skills. As its name suggests, it needs to investigate. It's an investigating directorate, and it needs skills because the state capture has decimated, well, a lot of things in this country, including the National Prosecuting Authority, including Hawks, including crime fighting capacity in this country. So it's been a hell of a mission, and it's taken, the voice you're going to hear is that of Sindisiwe Saboka, and she's the spokesperson for the ID, a former journalist who sat at the State Capture Inquiry with me for years. And she said the building phase, we were saying, okay, the ID is now established under Hermione Cronje. Why aren't you making arrests? They had to find staff. They had to find people with their expertise to be able to take on the most complicated money laundering cases in the country. And it's taken 2.5 years. Problem is, Hermione Cronje came in and left. Now it's under Advocate Andrea Johnson, who's now running that unit. And now, this is when things are starting to happen. She says the snowball is starting. Andrea Johnson's coming in. Criminal prosecutions is her forte, where under Hermione Cronje it was asset forfeiture. And I asked her outright in her interview with us, that is up on BizNews YouTube channel, when are we expecting more arrests? And we'll pick up after that.
We did promise court that by the 13th of July, we're going to have more people in the dock. We've also promised the nation through the NDPP as well as Advocate Andrea Johnson in Parliament a few weeks ago that the seminal matters or priority matters will be enrolled within the next 6 months. 2 from the ID have been enrolled. The seminal matters so enrolled will not just come from the ID, it's the NPA, law enforcement in its totality. However, 2 have been enrolled by the ID. People are working around the clock. We have been giving marching orders, constantly reminded that if it means working on a weekend, that's what will be done.
I like that. If we have to work on the weekend, that's what we'll do. But it's good news. Within the next 6 months, they expect more quote unquote seminal cases. And it won't just come from the ID. There are two big cases now that have been enrolled. They were arrested on the 25th and the 27th of May. These are all Gupta-related, Transnet, Tegeta, Optimum Coal, the rehabilitation, where they basically rerouted the funds from it was Optimum Coal Mine and Koornfontein Mine, where they took the rehabilitation funds and they used it for the purchase of other things.
For the purchase of the mine.
Of Optimum Coal Mine. And
that's really naughty because you take something out of a trust account, it's like a lawyer's trust account, and then you use it as a deposit to buy an asset from Eskom. Who actually, now these Guptas, and you know what? I actually feel quite happy about it now because the Guptas must be kicking themselves. If they had managed to hold on to Optimum Coal Mine with a coal price doubling, that thing would have been worth, it is worth an independent fortune today. And a heck of a lot more than what they paid when they bought it from Eskom, or from whoever it was, it was BHP Billiton, I think. But whatever they paid for it was done in a very dodgy manner. Eskom gave them the deposit.
It was a prepayment of 600 million, and then they used, it was a complete mess.
It was a mess, but they never used their own money because they never had their own money. They just used other people's. But even so, had they gotten away with it, well, I guess you and I wouldn't be sitting here now, would we? Who knows what South Africa would have been if we'd had another few years of the Zuma regime.
So, more arrests. I did ask the obvious question. Who was at Transnet when the CDB loan, the China Development Bank loan for the 1064 locomotives, it was a $1.5 billion loan that we were going to get from the China Development Bank. There was interest rate swaps, etc., etc. It was Brian Molefe. His signature is on the document. It is Anwar Singh. Those are the gentlemen who are not amongst the 5 who were arrested on the 27th of May. I said, come on now, Cindy. Are we expecting these people in the dock? She just said, we made the promise that by the 13th of July, more people would be in the dock. So let's see what that means.
Unlucky 13 for some.
Indeed.
On to my next story, which is looking back at the month of May with David Bacher of Corion. They bring out the Corion report every month, looking at what happened in the past month. And this was a very turbulent 4-week period. He summarizes it quite well. Let's have a listen.
I think you have to go back to 2001 since the US market has had 7 weeks of negative returns, and it looked like it was going to be an 8th week. If you look at the Corion report this month, you'll see equity markets, slightly and marginally down, but that certainly doesn't tell the full picture. It was almost like a roller coaster. You were down 8 and then up almost 8. So it was a hell of a ride to be pretty much flat.
So every morning when I write the BizNews Premium newsletter to our premium subscribers, as these markets were falling for an extended period, which only happened in 2001. So you're going back 21 years for a similar situation, 7 weeks of decline on the trot. I had to keep reminding everybody that with investing, you must invest for the long term. We started our shift portfolio in December, and we said it's a 5-year investment. Please don't get shaken out until 5 years' time. Then we can confidently look back and say, okay, we've either done well or we haven't done well. Now, we're only into the first 5 months of the portfolio's life. But to get this kind of a 7-week period when you're an investor into US equities, and particularly the kind of stocks that we've recommended, which are exponential shares, which are shares which are growing, because as the economy changes, you want to be invested in the horses that are running fastest because the track conditions suit them. You really don't want to get onto the old cart horses, even though temporarily they will outperform. In the long term, they certainly can't. And that's the period we went through. And David explained that we know that April was one of the worst months in many, many years, but that it continued into May. And that 7-year decline was the worst, as he said, since 2001. The last week of May, finally, the stock market turned around. It pulled back just about everything that it lost in those previous 3 weeks and ended the month of May flat. But the turbulence that had occurred during those 4 weeks was quite extraordinary. And again, that's a video that's well worth watching. It's up on the BizNews TV YouTube channel.
What's the overall message here? Sit on your hands. Don't look at it too closely, or look at it but don't act.
No, the message is if you're investing, do your homework and don't be knocked around and don't buy Mr. Market, because Mr. Market is a crazy guy. He's a
schizophrenic,
manic depressive without any medication. He'll wake up one day and say, have my half for 50, and the next day he'll wake up and I'll buy your half for 100. So it's all due to his mood, animal spirits, as some people call it, of the species, the human species. And it is not related to the value that you're buying. There's a wonderful saying that if you have a hamburger that's on sale, you get 2 hamburgers for the price of 1, you will more likely go and buy that hamburger than you would on a day, Wacky Wednesday at Steers. You'd know about these things, Mike. But in share markets, when you get 2 hamburgers for 1, or when the price halves, people want to sell. Yeah. So it's like, you just got to overcome that philosophical approach to investing and take a long-term view. Don't trade. Look, some people do trade successfully, but the vast majority get taken out because they're trading against massive institutions, very smart people with all the technology at their disposal and the balance sheets at their disposal, and they do it for a living, and amateurs do it for fun. It's not so much fun, as we've seen in the United States, many retail investors being carried out. But as an investor, main message, just hang in there. And you can see, had you lost patience on the 3rd week of May, you'd be feeling pretty sore right now, given the rebound that we saw since.
Point of interest, what is the Twitter share price doing at the moment?
It's been bouncing around. If you recall, Elon Musk has made a bid.
54.20, it's never ever going to go back up to that, anywhere near that level.
Right, we don't know. But it then, what we did in our portfolio was we said the share price was at $50 or $49.80 or something. Yeah. Just take your profits, because you never know what might happen. And we did. We sold it there. It went all the way down into the 30s on an anticipation that he's never going to buy it at 54.20, as you've just said.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know what's in the guy's head. But if the rest of the stock market has fallen as dramatically as it has, why would he want to pay top dollar? Why wouldn't he find a way to reduce the price that he put on the table initially? One doesn't know, but it's in the early 40s the last I looked.
Okay, moving on to Advocate Hoffman. And I had a pretty long conversation with Paul Hoffman yesterday, and it was around, I asked him about, whether we need to celebrate the fact that there have been a couple of arrests, and the bar is pretty low for accountability in South Africa, and we tend to celebrate arrests. But we also need to be realistic. Arrests do not equal prosecutions.
Convictions, yeah.
Or convictions. So with the Estina matter, the Gupta matter, many years ago, the National Prosecuting Authority enrolled a case involving Estina. There were a whole bunch of Gupta acolytes there, and then they ended up withdrawing the case because they weren't getting the requisite cooperation from the United Arab Emirates and India, which is where a lot of the money was circulating. So they had to withdraw the case provisionally. So if we see prosecutions, we want to know, if you're going to take your time, make sure the prosecutions are rock solid. Now, part of building rock solid cases is, according to Advocate Hoffman, you need a properly independent, properly resourced anti-corruption entity, ACE. And that requires that this agency be STIRS compliant. Now, as promised, what is STIRS compliance? STIRS compliance, and where this comes from, is the Justice Moseneke and Cameron wrote a Glenister judgment saying that I think this is back in 2011 already. This is after the Scorpions were disbanded. The current formulation of the Hawks, was it constitutional? And they said that a anti-corruption agency requires 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different factors that will make it STIRS compliant. South Africa needs this. It directed the National Assembly through this judgment to make sure that there's an anti-corruption body that is STIRS compliant. Now, STIRS is S, it must be specialized. It must be full of specialized prosecutors. T, people who are properly trained to do this work. I, it must be completely independent. the good advocate says he wants a Chapter 9 institution so that it cannot be dissolved as the Scorpions were by a mere majority of Parliament, 50 plus 1, and the Scorpions were gone. The ANC used their majority in Parliament, and that was it. So it must be a Chapter 9 institution. It must have that independence, or it must be properly resourced. We mustn't pay lip service to the fight against corruption. I was having a look at the budget for the NPA and the ID. The budget for the NPA got slashed by 422 million rand. I think it was in last year's budget, when the budget for VIP security for our politicians and their families was going up. So it's all about where you want your where your priorities lie.
Blue light brigades.
So it must be properly resourced. And then S, and this is what we've touched on. It must have security of tenure. It mustn't report to the executive. The NPA,
i.e. the president
or cabinet, it must report to Parliament. It must be like the public protector that doesn't report to any politician. It reports to Parliament as a whole, to the portfolio committee. And that's where the accountability lies. So it must be STIRS compliant. And Advocate Hoffman saying what we have now in its current format, the investigating directorate, as it was written into law, it can be removed by a presidential proclamation.
Just like the Scorpions.
So the president, it exists at the behest of President Ramaphosa. We don't know who the next president's going to be, Alec. So the ID, there is a belief within the National Prosecuting Authority, and Advocate Hoffman wrote a great piece that is up on biznews.com saying, stop tinkering with the NPA, in that the ID is not STIRS compliant. It doesn't have security of tenure. It's not sufficiently independent. It doesn't have the resources or the training. He says, Justice Raymond Zondo said you're going to need an army of prosecutors to deal with the Zondo report. And he says the ID does not have an army of prosecutors.
So it's not the R, the resourced.
It is not. So he wrote a great piece saying we need something truly independent, and he believes it needs to be this Chapter 9 institution. Here's Advocate Hoffman.
The three big parties have committed themselves, in theory, to the reform of the criminal justice administration in order to render it effective and efficient in countering serious corruption. The logjam is not because there's no political will, but it is because the deck chairs on steamship ANC have to be reorganized before it hits the iceberg, which will occur in 2024. When the electorate expresses its opinion.
I do believe that Advocate Hoffman just referred to the ANC as the Titanic.
Well, I like the point he makes about 2024, because it's a drum that certainly I've been beating privately. If the current trends continue, the ANC will not be the government after 2024. But the whole of the business community anyway, which I'm close to, has not taken that into account, and they're continuing to act as though, as Jacob Zuma said, the ANC will rule till Judgment Day. You know, there could be big changes here. I think many South Africans are hoping that we get that new brush or that new broom sweeping clean, but it does mean massive changes in the political structures, and no doubt within the other bodies, the bureaucracy, in time the bureaucracy, but immediately it will be the political structures. So well done, Paul, and well done, Mike, for actually unpacking all of that for us. It makes a lot of sense to me now.
Just one last thing. I just realized this story broke late last night, that Arthur Fraser, the former spy boss, part of the head of the State Security Agency, who somehow wound up being the Commissioner of Correctional Services. He was the Correctional Services Commissioner when Jacob Zuma was released on medical parole from prison. He has laid a criminal complaint against President Cyril Ramaphosa. I will go into the details. I think it's something we can look at next week. But he says, and I don't want to speak incorrectly here, but there was 20 million, I think dollars or rand, I'm not sure, that went missing, that was stolen, and President Ramaphosa paid somebody to keep the story quiet. And in terms of, and this allegedly happened in 2020, so why Arthur Fraser's raising it now 2 years later, nobody knows, but he's charging him, or laying the complaint under the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, PRECA. And that is basically, if you have knowledge of criminality, it is your duty as a member of the public or politician or the president to report that criminality. But then it works both ways, Mr. Fraser. If you had knowledge that the president had knowledge of this criminality and you have waited 2 years to report the president, then you should also land in hot water, no? So interesting time, is it not, that the president of the country, I think the charges were laid last night. I saw the letter, Eric Mabuza attorneys, and it was laid at the Rosebank police station. So we'll see what comes of that. Just another day in South Africa, Alec.
There's so much happening. There's so much nonsense that we know, that we've seen. We make orders for rolling stock that are the wrong size rail, and you get something like this that is going to now distract people's attention. Anyway, my last discussion for this week is with Magnus Heystek and his new found love in Mauritius. He spends a lot of time in Mauritius, and it's called the Harmony Golf and Beach Estate. You need about 20 million rand to buy one of the 220 luxury villas that are there. It is right in the middle of Boere Monaco. You get a 2,000 square meter stand with your villa, and you get a sea view or a golf course view, or both. So depending on which one of these villas you decide to buy. Magnus is bringing out the property developer, a guy called Stefan Pompanel, and the guy who helped to develop Danefern in the early days, to come and talk to his clients in the next couple of weeks. So they're going to be here. And I spoke to Magnus today and to the other two just to find out a little bit more about this very interesting development. Because when Heystek goes big, those people who've watched his career will know that he was one of the early investors in Danefern. He had a number of, I think he just bought everything he could get his hands on or could afford, and made an enormous amount of money in property there. And he reminds us of the point we made right at the beginning of the A-Plus this week, of this episode, that during times of inflation, high inflation, residential property is a winner because of that gearing factor. Anyway, let's just hear a little bit of what I said to Magnus was, okay, it's about 20 million rand. How does that compare with the playground of the wealthy in South Africa, which is Hermanus? Having been to Hermanus recently, we had a look around there. We looked at some of the properties. As an interest point, I can have you.
Oh, is that right?
Well, I live in Johannesburg. I guess people who live in Cape Town, they might be able to up their ante and buy in Hermanus. But certainly for a Johannesburger to look at those numbers, they are just wild and very aligned with what you can buy now in Mauritius. So I said to Magnus, is this a fair comparison, Hermanus versus Mauritius?
But it'll be buying in Hermanus in the early days before it became so popular, because Hermanus today is magnificent. It's one of the most pretty parts in the world. I know it very well and love it. But you're paying the same kind of price you would for a sea-facing property in Hermanus as you would in Mauritius. The only difference over time, I suspect, will be a currency factor, what the currencies do relative to the dollar.
It's an interesting story. So here you've got Mauritius. There were quite a few advantages. If you spend more than 140 days a year, I think it was 139 days a year in Mauritius, you can become a Mauritius tax resident, and their tax is far more
advantageous
in South Africa, massively so. It's complex, but if you're looking to find another part of the world that's not too far away from home, where you can escape the crime, violence, and strange economic policies of an ANC government, then Mauritius is a place to look at. Of course, those optimists among us who believe that after 2024 we're going to get a sensible economic policy in this country when the ANC perhaps or hopefully for people who are interested in economics, hopefully are replaced, or at the very least their policies are replaced, then we could kind of hang in here. But he says a lot of people are trying to get a second home somewhere in the world. And I guess the point he makes in this little clip was Hermanus versus Mauritius. So if you're looking at Hermanus, well, Mauritius is just a similar option for you. And there's so many South Africans on the Boer Monaco that you actually feel very much at home.
So you have to speak Afrikaans and French Creole.
There we go. Yep. That's it.
Cheapest.
A little bit of English in between. They all speak English as well. So those of us from KZN will be okay. But it is definitely, Afrikaans is it's not an official language there, but it certainly is part of the lingua franca.
So to my last story, which is just the look at the cost of living. Things are tough back home, but they're tough everywhere in the world at the moment. And this is from our partners, the Financial Times. And now it's been quite a while since I bought a beer. But if I was a drinking man, I wouldn't like to pay a minimum of £8 for a pint. That is 156 Rand for a beer. And I know you mustn't.
What do you pay in South Africa?
You mustn't.
20 Rand?
No. It's like, I'm guessing about 45 Rand.
Okay.
For a draft. And this is a pint, which is 500 mils.
Okay.
So, but
it's about a quarter then, right?
Yeah. The FT says the cheapest beer you can find is £1.79, and that's about $35. I think that, and that's in Lancashire. That's the cheapest. And it just got me thinking, because the cost of living has gone up, the wages you need to pay your staff has gone up, and that's all linked to just oil and gas, fuel prices going up around the world, and the extension, that got me thinking about the extension from the Department of Mineral Resources and Treasury of that R1.50 cut slash to the general fuel levy. It coming right on the button, almost on the evening of I don't know why they left it right until but I think they just realized at 25 Rand per litre fuel price, they're going to be facing a popular revolt if these
the optics are bad, aren't they? It's another barrier. It's another new benchmark, 25 Rand. It doesn't feel quite as bad at 23.50.
Yeah. So there's going to be a R1.50 cut just for one extra month for June. In July, it drops to 75 cents that they're going to assist the motorists by. That leaves a hole in the fiscus of 4.5 billion Rand. Now, you remember the first time they did this for 2 months, it left a 6 billion Rand gap. And they were going to sell the strategic crude oil reserves to make up that gap. I'm not sure what they're going to be selling this time around, but perhaps we can afford it. Alec, you'll be able to tell us we can afford it.
They don't have to sell anything. The money is flowing into South Africa at the moment. If we could just get Transnet right.
Yes.
We could be exporting twice as much coal as we're exporting at the moment. But we're still exporting a heck of a lot of coal, which is being trucked to the port. So it's a really weird situation. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been good for the South African rand and good for the South African economy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what Russia produces and sells in the global markets, we also sell into the global markets. It's like having one of your major competitors just being eliminated. Nobody wants to buy, certainly in Europe, they don't want to buy anything from Russia. And China and India, although they're very happy to be getting this discounted oil and gas and other products, the supply chain isn't very aggressive or isn't very, very smooth to those two countries. So Russia's selling to them, but not selling nearly as much as they were in the past. And China and India weren't buying from us anyway of the commodities that we're now selling into Europe. So all round, it's an opportunity that South Africa really, really needs to get Transnet fixed. the Russian sanctions are going to be there for a long, long, long time. It's very hard to remove them once they're in. And if South Africa could just get that rolling stock working, could just get our trains moving to the degree they should have, then this little 4.5 billion rand fuel subsidy is a drop in the ocean compared with what is being earned by the fiscus, by the government, by you and I as taxpayers from this incredible bonanza. And remember, coal is our biggest export earner.
Yeah.
So it's our biggest export earner. It's doubled in price in the past year, and it's likely to remain at these elevated levels for some time to come because of the Ukrainian war. However, we just can't get enough of this stuff to the port quickly enough to take full advantage.
Speaking to Dr. Theo de Jager, the president of the World Farmers Association, yes, coal is our biggest export, but agriculture is also a major contributor. And how farmers who are producing for the export market, their goods get to the ports, and that's where it sits. And that's where they've decided to change the products that they're selling to the export market. As you say, we can get as many trains as we want, though. That report that came out recently, our ports are voted or were ranked the least efficient or least effective in the world.
Well, siyabonga to siyabonga Gama for that.
Yeah. So here is the FT.
Pub goers are in for some pain. The price of a pint is up in some places to more than £8. That's like $10. So it better be a good beer. Anyway, you can't really blame the pub owners. They've got higher wages to pay and higher costs for everything from electric bills to barley. And if you don't want to pay £8 or $10, you'll have to go to Lancashire. One industry tracker says that's where you'll find the UK's cheapest pint, £1.79.
So if you like beer and you have got lots of money,
fly to the UK.
Go to the UK, go to Lancashire. It's probably a divey kind of pub that you're going to. And there you can have, to your heart's content, at about a similar price to South Africa.
Yeah.
Or you can just go to your local pub here in South Africa and be happy with it.
It'll cost you 116 Rand more on your tank to fill it to get to your favorite pub. And if you're traveling, you're filling up once a week, it's about 500 Rand extra a month.
Okay, so we had some good news, some bad news, but I guess that's what's in the news, isn't it?
That's the mixed bag that is the A-Plus Show, episode 6.
Until next time, cheerio.